Hello out there, all of Healthy for Life clients and customers. Welcome to tonight's webinar. Our guest speaker tonight is Dr. Sandy Seeman. Sandy is a graduate of the University of Iowa. So she is I think they call them Hawkeyes. I've been adopted as a citizen of Iowa. I attended a different university. Sandy is also a graduate of Bastyr University, which is a wonderful naturopathic medical school in Seattle, Washington, I believe. Sandy can correct all the mistakes I make about introducing her when she gets on. And I think they have a campus in San Diego. And we were laughing because you can see behind Sandy's head is Sandy's medical degree from Bastyr. And Sandy is going to speak tonight about naturopathic medicine. What is it? Its values, answer questions, what it's not, and how she can be helpful to our clients and customers. And I personally refer everyone I can to Sandy because she's a wonderful person, a wonderful doctor. And that's what we do here. So sit back and enjoy the presentation, and then I'll facilitate the question and answers toward the end of Sandy's talk. Thank you. Sandy, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to get my presentation up here so you don't have to stare at my face that's not just sunburned. Now I'm blushing with all of those kind words there. So let me start the slideshow here. Oh, start it again. There we go. So yeah, I think Tim was brilliant in the way that not only did he say, for me, it's important to talk about what naturopathic medicine is, but it's really important also to talk about what it isn't. I think there are so many myths and misunderstandings and misnomers, especially given that we live in a state that's not licensed for naturopathic doctors, that, has really made this conversation a little bit more difficult than probably it needed to be. So my goal tonight is, hopefully to kind of sort some of that out, as well as to really talk about how I believe, that, and that's why I got into this, is that naturopathic medicine is really the medicine of the future, as well as that I think so many different people don't have to choose either or, you can choose both. You can have this great village, that kind of takes care of you and looks out for you in every way and on the whole spectrum, of different interventions that are there. As Tim mentioned, I do have a medical degree, so it isn't just a quick fly-by-night online, sort of a situation. It's definitely, there's the same type of oversight as a lot of other doctors. So the first thing for me is to get philosophical, to really talk about the differences between naturopathic medicine and medical, our medical system, the medical system that we are used to. For me, the most important thing is to talk about the differences of philosophy, because that's just the entire approach is really what's the biggest difference. I think people really want to focus on modalities and on the different treatments that I utilize, but really for me, it's the whole philosophy is really what brings me to the table, so to speak, as far as what that is, because you can use supplements just the same as you would use medications or use anything else, surgeries or anything else along those lines to treat symptoms. And it's still not really a naturopathic treatment. You're using something that is a modality that's considered naturopathic, but you're not utilizing it according to the philosophy. And this was just sort of drilled time and time again, into the entire practice of it. So I think that's one thing that really differentiates naturopathic doctors, is that there isn't a lot of unlearning, unlike a lot of practitioners that learn, go to medical school or go to, different schools to be a doctor, and then, or a practitioner, and then kind of decide they want to add on something that's natural, often they're sort of coming back, to the philosophy piece and sort of unlearning the philosophy that they had. So it was really important for me, um, in that every interaction that I had that was guided by and really overseen, by naturopathic doctors through my schooling was really guided by this philosophy. So the first piece of the philosophy is really recognizing that there is within each one of us, a healing power, a healing force, and we can get really spiritual with that, as far as different philosophies of medicine, as well as different, spiritual practices, call this something different, but it is really all being referred to the same thing, in that sense. The healing power, the healing force, the vis, the chi, the prana, I could go on and on and on, even the Holy Spirit, to a certain extent could even, could even be, argued amongst, falling amongst this. So recognizing that healing itself is an ordered and intelligent process, that there is no mistake, there is no coincidence, there is no accident when it comes to the messages from the body that we've called symptoms, in that sense. And the totality of your symptoms is what, doctors call a diagnosis. But for me, the totality of your symptoms is really helps me to look for an underlying cause, an underlying issue. So every doctor takes the oath to first do no harm, but to me, it really is about minimizing the side effects. Not only do medications have side effects, but supplements do as well. Anyone who's taken, an extra multivitamin or an extra B vitamin with lots of niacin and had that beautiful niacin flush, would definitely tell you that supplements give side effects. My job is, rather than pushing the body to remove obstacles, and help and guide and assist, that self-healing process, that healing power that we just referred to. To me, identifying the cause, which I, joke of, myself as being sort of an investigative reporter for health, really that we're looking at and I'm kind of coaxing out more and more symptoms, that we've taught so many, our medical system has taught us to edit, it's taught us to pare down and really condense our stories. So I do a lot of, asking people ad nauseum, and what else, and what else, so that so that they're not suppressing their own story, when they come to me, and so that I cannot suppress, any of those symptoms as well. That my job is not to suppress them, suppress their story, or to treat, those symptoms, those messages, from the body. But my job is really to look at the totality, look at that whole picture, in that sense. I joke that after being an investigative reporter, my next job is to be a teacher, is to educate my clients, empower my clients, to tell them everything I know, to not make it this idea that there's a secret, that only I have. I don't guard, those types of things that have been helpful for me. To me, it's so important for people to leave here having the tools, to not just, not be a revolving door. To me, it's so important to work myself out of a job, is kind of what I joke with my clients that I do. If I give away all the secrets and I tell them everything about how to be healthy, then they will be healthier, and our community will be healthier, and our world will be healthier, which is the whole goal, for this to just spread and get that much better. And then I have a whole subset of clients who come to me not only looking forward, for prevention, but also come to me recognizing their own, whether it's family history, or something along those lines of potholes, that I say, it's our job to steer around that we've seen that, different, ancestors or family members, struggled with these different issues. And well, that, that lifestyle, or that may have been passed to you, it doesn't mean that you have to fall into that. We really do a lot of empowerment here about recognizing how we can shift and change, that trajectory of family history, as well as, recognizing that we don't have to carry the same habits and that same nurture. We really get to stand on the shoulders of our parents and them on their parents. And so we do a lot of that recognition of the healing process is sometimes, kind of finishing or healing or, you know, guiding ourselves around something that someone else in our family didn't get the chance to do, that they had a bigger lesson to learn than us and we can learn it through them. So treatments, is the next, big thing. And for me, all treatments, every single treatment that you could possibly label, whether we think of them as good or bad or, indifferent, or ugly, falls on the therapeutic order that I think of like a ladder. And my job is not only to create a strong foundation and a basis for health and healing, but also to match the treatment to where that person is at that moment in time. Say somebody comes to me with something that is really serious. I'm not just going to be talking to them about their diet, maybe, and and the way they move their body. We're going to be utilizing different therapeutics and also balancing that with the therapeutics, that they're receiving, and being guided upon through their medical doctor. So really matching the treatment to the person, and also recognizing that we didn't all come in with the same constitution, the same illness, with somebody that's on a really rocky, kind of constitutional road is going to be too much. So that's really how we guide dosage and how we guide, different therapeutics and even different delivery methods for therapeutics based on the person and kind of what they can handle, as well as what they're willing to do, right now. I do a lot of testing in my office that other practitioners won't do, don't do, or don't know how to read or how to, to do any treatments based on that. So there's, some of what we're looking for is looking for the cause based on things that maybe you have too much of or that you have too little of. So we do a lot of testing for nutritional status here, possibly, different issues with foods maybe that aren't really compatible with you or your immune system. Looking at hormones is a big one here because there are so many underlying causes, whether it's inflammation, whether it's even allergies have some underlying basis with hormones. We do some looking here at neurotransmitters, looking for underlying causes and, different interventions, sort of guided by what the body is telling us. For different mood, or sleep issues. We look at the microbiome here and really ways to optimize the microbiome as well. And, as I mentioned on the therapeutic order, really looking at that foundation for that determinant of health, that foundation is so vitally important as a starting point. To me, we don't just get to take pills and outdo or undo, what it is that we're not doing in a healing basis. So from a treatment standpoint, I do a lot of working with diet and lifestyle choices. We work with botanicals here and, noting and understanding the ways in which they can interact with different foods and different medications. We work with nutritional supplements here, again, what somebody could not have enough of, a deficiency of a nutrient, as well as a depleted, diet that's maybe missing some different nutrients as well. We do a lot of practicing what it feels like to eat, either fruits or vegetables, or maybe something that we haven't worked into the diet yet by practicing with a supplement. And that's just to let you feel, wow, what a difference, it is when I get those things in my diet. Utilizing that in the temporary and as motivation to say, wow, how much better am I going to feel when I get more of these worked into my diet? Physical medicine is also a piece of naturopathic philosophy and naturopathic treatments, as well as homeopathy, which is a whole different kind of system and style of medicine that is really, to me, enticing and encouraging because it is really the one of the least force, and has zero interactions, so in the case where somebody comes to me and we're really painted into a corner with what it is that we can utilize for therapeutics, we're never out of options, when it comes to the practice of homeopathy. So each person is unique, and therapeutics have to match that person, their individual situation, their individual constitution, kind of what they're willing to do, where they're at, Um, so individuality is key. I talk about, that to me, the idea of a protocol, which is such a functional medicine term right now. What's your protocol for this? To me, that's a four-letter word, even though I recognize it's not really four letters. To me, it's one of those things that it's taboo to me, because I'm not giving really the full weight to individuality if I'm utilizing something like a protocol. So naturopathic doctors do attend medical school. They do have training. There is 6 different schools, as Tim was mentioning, that now Bastyr has 2 different locations. One which I wish I could have attended in sunny San Diego, but I ended up being in rainy and dark Seattle instead, where I did my training. So there's even a school in Chicago, which is not an incredible distance away for those of us in the Midwest as well. Right now, there are 22 states that have licensing or registration laws for naturopathic medicine. We're kind of, in some ways, you would assume that they're all the coasts, but we're actually, kind of flanked and surrounded by different states in our area. So Minnesota has registration laws, and Kansas has licensing laws. So for clients of mine who are concerned or interested in kind of seeing somebody on that spectrum, I hold a license in Washington State, which is not only where I did my training, but it's one of the states that has the one of the most defined scopes of practice, as far as one of the kind of strongest requirements as far as the examinations that I took in order to obtain my license, and one of the strongest continuing education, for me, which shows my clients that I'm dedicated to continuing my education as well, that I didn't stop learning as soon as I hung that piece of paper on the wall, is really important. um, Iowa right now we've gone through a couple different pushes, for licensing. It's just not on the forefront kind of right now, and it needs a champion, for the bill, as well as obviously funding, for different lobbyists. And, for me right now, my push is to have as many people who've had experience with naturopathic medicine, so that, if or when the call goes out to say, we need people to come down and talk to legislators, that we have an army of people who have positive stories, positive information to share. So um, I've been investigated by the Iowa Board of Medicine, which sounds a lot more scary than it really was. But just they wanted to recognize that they knew that I was here, that they recognized the way that I practice. And if you paid attention kind of to the idea about a diagnosis, is really just a set of symptoms, and my job is not really to give things names, in that sense. I tell my clients it doesn't matter whether it's called purple spotted liver disease. I'm still going to want to know what's the cause, in that sense. So I don't diagnose anybody with anything, although I look for testing to help me to understand the cause. Um, Yet I also don't treat disease. So if you come here with a health condition, we're still going to be asking questions about what's the cause. And that's really where our treatment modalities are really, painted at. So they understood that I was sort of, not, not competing, with them in that sense, that I didn't want to practice that. So they say that I don't practice medicine, but to me, I'm practicing exactly the type of medicine that I want to practice. So there's no concern about what it is that I'm doing here. You don't have to worry that I'm going to be, hauled off to jail at any moment in time during an appointment, because there's, total transparency with who I am in the medical community that's here. So that's one nice thing that gives me a lot of encouragement, that not only this type of medicine is important here, but it's not being fought, by the medical community at that point in time. So there's a lot of myths that I want to kind of talk about with naturopathic medicine, because there are people who call themselves naturopaths who have gone to, some level of online or very quick, kind of education. So me calling myself a naturopathic doctor and saying that I practice naturopathic medicine is intended to really distinguish myself as being separate and in a separate category. That my education was in person. My education was a 4-year, education, 2 years of which basically mirrors, the University of Washington, basic sciences, and, all of the different ologies, that every doctor, should be learning at. Those, to me, were just as rigorous as, what they were learning at the University of Washington. But in addition to, having to practice and understand biochemistry, it was really pushing us to say, not only this becomes this becomes this becomes this, and memorizing that and being able to draw the different amino acids and, and their practices, but it was also saying, and what nutrients, so that was really for me where the rubber met the road of really understanding biochemistry, and not only how we can intervene, with biochemistry, but how we can really get clogged, in our biochemistry without adequate nutrition, and that's really, it isn't just something you learn and memorize and forget. It's something you learn and memorize and really dig into when you start to look at botanicals and, the ways that different herbs can impact these different pathways in biochemistry. So it gets even more exciting from there. It's not just about a hoop that you jump through, in that recognition that many degrees are that way. Another big myth is that now there's no science or no evidence to kind of as a basis for naturopathic medicine, and that really couldn't be further from the truth. Tim and I were just having a discussion right now. One of the hotbeds, of really, where new research and new evidence is coming forward, is really being able to look at almost any health condition that, one of my clients would come, to me with, and, and putting into PubMed, which is a huge database of all research, in many, many different publications, and being able to say, such and such condition and microbiome and nutrition, and really getting that sense of, hundreds and hundreds of articles, in the case of things like CBD, which is still in its infancy state. It still has, thousands of articles, for instance, that are coming up. So this recognition that there's no science or that there's no evidence to back it up is really only being put forth by people that haven't looked, in that sense. And the idea that naturopathic doctors are anti-pharma or anti-surgery, or the big one, now the anti-vax or anti-maskers or anti, anything along those lines. There is, like every practitioner, there is a whole spectrum, and we are like snowflakes, not that meaning we're delicate, but meaning that we're all unique, in that sense, that there are rigorous debates right now, just as much among medical doctors as there are among naturopathic doctors about, different interventions. And many naturopathic doctors who practice in a licensed state and have a scope of practice, are utilizing pharmaceuticals on their own, or utilizing, not major surgeries, but minor surgeries, and are giving, these different injections to their patients, so this misnomer that I'm anti anything, or that I think of it as being a failure, or that there's some level of judgment about whether you take a medication or whether you've had a different procedure, is really not, my philosophy, which is meeting somebody where they're at, and really working with how can we help you to heal, regardless of where you're at or what's going on with you. The same thing is this idea that you can't see a naturopathic doctor and a medical doctor, that you can't have one foot, looking for all answers or all options, especially the more serious things get, in that sense. I love that I have, great connections, and great interactions with, say, different oncologists, in the Des Moines area, or cardiologists in the Des Moines area, that are if needed, if somebody says, I'm looking for, an option outside of what you can offer me, that they have a resource, or that they have someone that they know is, I'm not looking in a book, to look up, top 10 things to do for cancer. Like, I'm actually researching specific for the person and giving them individualized answers, as well as working with, minimizing and balancing the side effects, and supporting somebody through their journey, whether it's, post cardiac event, or whether it's, a cancer diagnosis or something along those lines, and really seeing that we are really just in that pioneer, aspect of individual relationships, really guiding that right now. But I see, us really reaching the forefront of having more and more of these interactions, and really building more and more of a network, like there are in more of the coastal, kind of cities, where integrative medicine, and even seeing, these practitioners who work side by side, is so vitally important. Another big one that I get, and possibly a reason why I don't get, some phone calls, is, this idea that naturopathic medicine is expensive, the idea that I'm going to tell people they have to, spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars a week, or thousands of dollars a month on food, or that it's only really for the elite, or for rich people, is really not couldn't be further, from the truth. For me, it's really important to have this medicine to be as available as possible to as many people, and I'm not saying that there aren't clients of mine who struggle, on a fixed income, but they also recognize the importance of their health, in line with their other bills, or in line with their other the other things that they do, and for me, from the time that I was in medical school, especially that, when I first learned about this, I was a college student. So it wasn't that I had a tremendous budget, for this. And I was going to, the co-op, in Iowa City, when I was first learning about this. And, I'm going to date myself, in the late 90s, to really learn about eating healthy food and eating local food. And I didn't have a lot of money, so I recognized from the get-go, that this has to be doable and recognizable on a budget. If it's not, it's not really accessible. And for me, this was not ever, meant to be something that was only for certain people. I covered the idea that, based on the education, that, the idea that naturopathic doctors are the same as a functional medicine practitioner, a homeopathic practitioner, a naturopath, somebody who calls himself a health coach, or anything along those lines. To me, I'm working from an education standpoint, not that there's anything wrong, with any of these other practitioners. It's just a completely different level, kind of education, of philosophy, and that kind of different guidance, in that sense. I get a lot of clients who have that myth about, if it's natural, it must be safe. It must be okay to use at any time, anywhere, at any level, any number of pills. And, so we do a lot of education around how it is possible, to take not only too many bottles of supplements. I tell my clients, if you have to bring in more than a box, we're probably going to end up paring it down, that there's a lot of good supplements out there, but our job is to narrow it down to what are the best supplements for you, and what determines that health foundation. Not, really, it should be diet and lifestyle should really be determining a lot of that. And a supplement should be just that. If you're, eating handfuls and handfuls of pills, you're probably overdoing it, at that point. And then just the tongue-in-cheek idea that, naturopathic doctors are perfect. They're going to scold me for every ritual, everything I enjoy, everything that's good must be bad, everything that I love must be terrible. And that I live a life of sacrifice and suffering and scarcity. Luckily I don't have, any yoke, on me to do the things that I do. We talk about how reframing, that idea, to me, the idea of dieting, or the idea of, just forcing yourself to get out and, especially for something like exercise, doing something you don't enjoy, to me, it should be an extension of play. It should be an extension of something you love. When clients of mine recognize that, doing something that they really enjoy, is exercise, like gardening or, something along those lines, it's like, oh, wow, I didn't even know, that this was something that is, that is for my health, that it changes it entirely, and recognizing that it is something that's helpful for them, body, mind, and spirit. To me, that's so vitally important that I don't separate any of those, those things out from that sense. Um, so I put together kind of a list of things that I've heard from my clients, or that I've, that to me is so vitally important for me to do as a practitioner, that, many of my clients give me the feedback. It's so important that you see beyond the symptoms, that you're really looking into the cause, of what it is that's going on. You're putting it together as a whole picture, that I can say, this symptom and this symptom and this symptom and this symptom that you may think are not, connected at all have this common thread, all have this common underlying, web that puts it all together. And when people see that and hear that, it's really being seen, it's really being heard, which to me is so valuable, that when my clients leave here, that they feel like not only they could bring their whole self, so that if tears come up, or if frustration comes up, or if, something along those lines, that we don't stifle that stuff here. We don't, kids don't have to sit still. Parents don't have to not get frustrated at their kids. You can really just be, who you are in that sense. Um, a lot of my clients have that frustration that their practitioners aren't willing to really help them, aren't really willing to work with them. If their goal is to get off of medications, that no one's really looking at not only the side effects that they may be having at that moment, but also, especially the more that we've learned in the last few years about long-term side effects of different medications, how important and vital that is to look, at the cause. And really, for me, I don't just get off of medications. It's about, how is this medication helping you, especially the longer somebody has been on it, so that we can recognize that if it's holding something in place, we need to put in a permanent, portion of scaffolding, not just how this has been temporarily helping. My clients, I love it when my clients leave here with that look or feeling, or, mention of hope, that this is a new approach. This is a new way of looking at it, that they've seen, sometimes multiple, practitioners that have looked at it the same way, or just, tried a different variation of the same, medicine. And so seeing that it's a whole new way often gives people hope, which to me is vital. Um, that's I have a lot of people who say, well, should I bring my blood work because the doctor told me that it was all normal? Or worse yet, they went in knowing that something is wrong, and they were told, oh no, everything's normal, everything's good, when they know something is not right. So being able to read blood work for nutrition, or being able to read blood work for optimal health versus not sick, to me, again, that lens or that philosophy is really looking at, is this liver functioning optimally? Is this kidney functioning optimally? Is this blood, chemistry level optimal? Which is a completely different question, which is why we get completely different answers. I do a lot to help my clients to navigate, other providers, to ask for the right testing, or to get the information that they need. So it isn't just that it's only an out-of-pocket expense, to get some answers as far as looking at that cause-based information as well. And then from a prevention standpoint, like I mentioned, steering around family history, or even preconditions. I see a lot of people who've, said, well, my blood sugar is higher than what the doctor wants to see it, but they didn't tell me anything to do about it, so to speak, that they'll just sort of wait to diagnose you, for blood pressure or blood sugar, or, conditions like that, really then looking at how can we steer out of, this situation, and prevent it from becoming a full-blown issue. So I wanted to keep it short so that we had plenty of time for questions. I kind of anticipated a few potential questions, but with kind of what I've written here, but I wanted to kind of open it up to what you wanted to know or what you had for questions for me.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Everyone, you can utilize the question and answer, and I see someone's already utilizing it, so let me facilitate that. Sandy, we take a probiotic that includes B1, 2, 3, 6, 12, 7, 5, and a prebiotic chicory root, as well as a probiotic blend, 20 billion CFU. Could you give us your advice, your opinion on combining all of these?
Yeah, well, to me, I think of the microbiome as like a stadium within our digestive system. So there are many, many different sections, many, many different seats, so, taking billions, of organisms may sound like a lot, and there was kind of this space race about 10 years ago almost with probiotics where it was, if you're going to do 1 billion, I'm going to do 2 billion. If you're going to do 2, I'm going to, so we've really landed with a myriad of different products, on the market that are really starting to get very specialized. And that's really depends upon the different parts of the immune system or the different ages, or different health conditions that people have. And that's really the nuance of where research is getting us, is that you would be better off, for instance, somebody may be better off focusing more on a bifidobacterium versus a lactobacillus, in that sense. But within that stadium, if you think of going to a sporting event or a concert at a stadium, there's almost always something to eat or drink. And that's what the prebiotics are, is the fiber that feeds the probiotics. If there are digestive pets and we want them to hang around, we've got to feed them. So in that sense, prebiotics and probiotics really go together. And whether that's through supplementation that you're talking about, or whether that's, also through the myriad of different vegetables and vegetable fibers, that or grains or other, forms of fibers that you're including in your diet. That's really what's important about it. Fiber, and the whole conversation about fiber, only really benefits, us in that it makes us feel full, but it really makes the microbiome happy, from that standpoint. A healthy, happy microbiome manufactures a lot of different vitamins for us. So that's one way that we can, cut down on some of the pills that we take, is by utilizing probiotics, from that sense. I have lots of opinions about B vitamins, for instance, depending on the person, depending on kind of their genetic or unique, kind of history and where they're at. B vitamins are water soluble, so they flush out of the system every day. We kind of start from scratch, with our B vitamins for the most part every day. So to me, B vitamins and vitamin C, and the other water soluble vitamins are really important to include regularly, because if we're not getting them through food and they've washed out from the day before, those are one of those supplements that are really important. For some B vitamins, it takes about 6 steps to activate them, and that's just more stress and strain on your liver. So for somebody that needs extra support, or maybe doesn't work with some of those 6 steps very adequately, then we work with different types of B vitamins, whether it's coming from food or whether it's coming in an activated, or a coenzyme is another name of that. So not all B vitamins are the same, I guess, is what I would say about the B vitamin aspect. But yeah, I think that sounds like a good blend.
The same person, what is an optimal amount of zinc? I think you and I were talking about zinc.
Yeah,
To
I
take per
think,
day.
going on, what are we going on, day 404 of 14 days to flatten the curve, and all of us started taking zinc, over a year ago from that standpoint, to boost our immune system. There were lots of different, great practitioners that were very well meaning, that gave extraordinarily high, to me, the highest you would ever want to go in an acute situation with zinc is 50 milligrams. But in the short term is completely different than now we're dealing with the long term. And, if I grew up watching like the Three Stooges, and where you would try to see, all three of them go through the doorway at once, and they would all, comically sort of fall back and fall down on their behinds. And that's a lot of what happens with our nutrients when we do extraordinary amounts of one nutrient and they all try to enter the same kind of receptor or the same, access points in the small intestine. If we're supplementing a lot with one, we can actually be depleting ourselves of others. So to me, in the short term, if somebody's feeling run down or needing an immune system boost, doing anything above, 15 milligrams is more of a short-term thing. In the long term, you want to make sure that you're supplementing in balance, between things like zinc and calcium and magnesium and copper, especially that zinc and copper really compete for absorption. And iron, kind of falls in that category as well, that all of those are uploaded, and utilized. And if you're putting in extraordinary amounts of one, and kind of depleting yourself of the others. So in the long term, I don't like to do much more than 10 to 15.
Sandy, here's a question. What are the possible causes of my blood pressure to be higher, my blood sugar higher in the morning than in late evening, even when I have not eaten after an evening testing?
Mhm. Well, we should be making high amounts of what's called cortisol, which is a hormone that's associated mostly with stress, but actually does so many positive things for us. Cortisol has kind of gotten a bad rap in the medical, naturopathic medical community, thinking that only problems with it being too high or being too low. But we should, honestly be making high levels of cortisol, which actually raises the blood sugar, in the morning. You may be making excessive amounts of cortisol, kind of depending on your situation. That might be an underlying cause, is that you're having an extraordinary boost, first thing in the morning of your cortisol levels, which cortisol raises the set point for blood sugar. So it isn't just about um, it being high, it's about the body wanting it to be high based on your cortisol levels. So that's one piece of the puzzle. And then often looking at what you ate the night before, as well as the quality of your sleep, kind of related to your cortisol response as well. High amounts of cortisol through the night, which we should, for the most part, cortisol should be very low in the evening time and should stay low, throughout the night. If you're having spikes of your cortisol during the day, kind of, stressful things that happen during the day, the body kind of sets that on repeat after a 12-hour process. So often sleep quality, kind of issues related to cortisol. So that might be something that you ask a practitioner to look at, as kind of your cortisol response, because that's most likely what's getting set a little bit too high, either throughout the night, before you go to bed, in that sense, or which before you go to bed is what's going to be repeated, kind of first thing in the morning in that sense, if it's out of balance.
Sandy, I noticed on your questions here, this is a question from me. Conversation we have here a lot. Sugar impairs the innate immune system. Could you speak a little bit to that, the impact of sugar on the immune system in general?
Yeah, so there's really two different types of the immune system, and that's really the kind of the first thing that is left out, of the conversation that we've had a lot in the last year, is recognizing that we have within us what I call the neighborhood watch, this part of our immune system that's always looking for what doesn't belong, that old, Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the others. So this part of our immune system is always on patrol, throughout our body, looking for, what are you doing here? You don't belong. You're not self, you're other, and you're harmful other. And this is really what's been discounted, and a lot of how we want to, deal with different issues, whether it's viruses, whether it's, bacteria, whether it's other things that we're exposed to. As I was digging in my garden, I'm sure I was stirring up a whole lot of mold, this weekend, from that sense. So, and breathing that in, so from that sense, we've discounted so much this innate immune system, which, the two kind of big players in that would be cells called natural killer cells, which they are what they say they are. That is exactly what they do, is that they poke holes and inject substances like hydrogen peroxide or ozone, into different cells, or just completely destroy, different, protein-based viruses, for instance, with these substances. And then the other cells are called macrophages, which in Latin just means big eaters. So they will literally just engulf and eat anything that doesn't belong and eliminate these things. And what we found is that not only stress increased above, as certainly at a certain point in time, what we should be making of cortisol or stress hormones, high amounts of sugar, especially things like 100 grams of sugar is a pretty common research study that's out there, basically binds to receptors on these different cells, whether it's the natural killer cells or those macrophages, and essentially they go dormant, or that it just impairs their function, that they kind of go on coffee break, so to speak, if I'm saying it, if I'm utilizing that neighborhood watch, aspect. And in the case of 100 grams of sugar, which I know is a lot, but it's not hard to get, unfortunately, with many of the sugary drinks or sugary different treats that are out there right now, which obviously, that level at, impairs, 100 grams impairs the immune system for 5 hours. And obviously there's going to be a different response based on lower level, kind of things. But sugar binds to the same receptors as vitamin C. So when we have this imbalanced idea that things like those little packets of vitamin C that often have tons of sugar, in them, or things like orange juice, if we're drinking that to help our immune system, we're getting so much more sugar than we are the actual vitamin C, which we know that vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, E, all of those stimulate this innate immune system, kind of not overcharge them, but supercharge them to really be on the lookout and kind of be on the patrol. So sometimes even things we think are good, for us can kind of impair that innate immune system. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Good.
that's very good. Yes. The same gentleman asked, what causes high cortisol levels, and how would you actually get it tested? Is there a blood test for cortisol?
There's actually a saliva test for cortisol, which is even better because you don't have to go anywhere to get anybody to poke your finger. And you can do it at, what I find in my practice that is the best for cortisol is to do this little saliva test, and they send you 4 different vials, and you do your saliva, you spit in this little tube first thing when you wake up, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and then just before bed. So kind of you're getting that spectrum of what the day should look like, that you should get a spike first thing in the morning, and then it should be kind of on the downward slide, almost like that big slide that's at the Iowa State Fair is really how it should look, kind of for the rest of the day. So we look at that 20, almost 24-hour kind of trajectory, and then we get to see, are you having these spikes? Are you having these drops? Cortisol is manufactured by our adrenal glands, so the same ones that make adrenaline, for instance. And adrenaline is the short-term stress hormone. Cortisol is more of the long-term stress hormone. I think of adrenaline as the short term. We call it the fight or flight. To me, I call it kind of the tiger jumping out of the bushes, example. You have to talk in front of a bunch of people. No, I'm just kidding. You have a short-term stressful event that happens. You're driving in your car and you look up and the traffic is stopped in front of you, that kind of a situation. Cortisol is more the tiger is chasing you all day. The tiger is behind you. The tiger is behind you. That's more the situation often that I find. And we see cortisol in the short term, in the beginning, when we start to see it impaired, we see it often running really high or having these kind of spikes in cortisol that often lead to a drop off, so it kind of, goes up and down, and often is mirrored in, the blood sugar is often mirrored in that as well, that if we're going to be running from the tiger all day, the body wants a constant and high supply of sugar, within the muscles to do that. That is really the primary fuel for the muscles and the brain, which we have to be running, and we have to be outthinking, the tiger. And I use that purposefully because in modern life, most of the stress that we have is what we make for ourselves and is imagined, that the tiger isn't real unless, I've heard that blank zoo had an escape, that I love that example because we recognize that it is something that we created, often in our own mind. It's not the only, thing, but often I find a lot of information from my clients who are under higher levels of stress, whether that's something that is, business wise, personal wise, or a myriad, of things along those lines. I often find clues in there as to not only how they're utilizing their energy and how that's impacting their blood sugar and their sleep, but also when, is most important to supplement, because often it's not the time that you think it is. And the right supplement at the right time is really that beautiful, aspect of how we can really make big differences with health in a short amount of time.
Sandy, same person, where would you get that test?
There's a lab that I work with called ZRT Labs, and you can order it and they send you the kit directly to you.
Cool, nice. Here's a question. This person wants to talk about healing food sensitivities or insensitivities.
Mhm.
Pretty broad general question. What are the vitamins and minerals that will help their digestive system function better?
When I talk about healing food sensitivities, which I have, that's a whole other lecture. We talk about what leaky gut really is and how to heal, leaky gut from that sense. That I think of the digestive system like a single chain link fence, which I happen to have between myself and my neighbor, and if I was concerned about my neighbor, if I wanted to keep my neighbor out, I'd put up that fence to keep my neighbor out and be very selective with a gate, for instance, about who I let into my yard, from my neighbors. And our digestive system should really be the same way. It shouldn't be that my neighbor comes along and, cuts the fence so that they can, push their trash or whatever they don't want, in through into my yard, from their yard. So in that sense, the digestive system should be completely intact, but also have the capability of selective absorption, and that's really when we talk about nutrition, we talk about the digestive system matrix, or kind of the collective balance, looking like, and being functioning like a chain link fence, that there is an underlying structure, that comes from our nutrition that makes up that chain link fence matrix. And then each cell within those little diamonds of the chain link fence is like a water bottle, or a water balloon, for instance, that's in there, or those solo cups, that people will spell things out, in their on chain link fences and schoolyards. So not only do we need to heal that matrix, but we also need to make sure that every cell, is intact. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, kind of healing leaky gut, which often is one of those underlying causes for inflammation, through the digestive system, and, which of course translates to the rest of the body, as well as, can be one of those underlying causes for food sensitivities. And when I see a myriad of different food sensitivities, we know that it has a lot to do with that matrix, which the immune system is really what sits right on the inside of that chain link fence and really guards, that barrier between us and still the digestive system is the outside world until it's selectively absorbed. So when I see a lot of inflammation, within the system, I know that there's something going on, that the digestive system isn't being as selective, as what it should be nutritionally. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's a great, and it's interesting, this question of what vitamins or minerals that would help. Probably if someone's coming to you, that's not just, you don't just throw out vitamins and minerals. I mean,
Right.
right, because you're going to be looking for the root cause of what's going on in the microbiome, what's going on in the digestive system.
That's right. And with a leaky gut situation, the more, nutrients you throw at it until you heal that leaky gut, the more nutrients you throw at it could be, we see overabsorption and we see underabsorption from that standpoint. And everything that's absorbed through the digestive system goes straight to the liver, in that sense. So we see, an unhealthy digestive system really impairing the liver function by having too much, of things coming through as well. So yeah, it's as much, about being really selective about the nutrients, which is just the nutrients that somebody needs, as opposed to, yeah, just kind of having, like I said, that protocol, that 4-letter word to me, um, about it or how to heal it.
Yeah. There's a couple more questions. At the beginning of your talk, you talked about the importance of story.
Mm-hmm.
The question is twofold. The importance of story, but also as you were talking, how much time do you get to spend with your patients, clients? Because the last I heard in our medical system is somewhere between 8 and 12 minutes. A doctor will be in the room with
Yeah.
them, which um, gives very little time to Sandy, tell me your story.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that would be,
That's usually what I say.
or
Yeah, that's usually a
talk
part.
fast, Sandy, talk really fast.
Exactly. That's a part of my spiel usually in the first visit, which is an hour long. And some of my clients prefer to have that hour every time they come in. Sometimes they still need a second hour to kind of finish their first visit, to kind of finish their first story. So in some cases, I find, particularly with my teenage clients, right, that an hour is too long, that they want to tell me about a 2-sentence story is all they want to talk about. And I have to coax it out of them. And then some clients are like, an hour is not nearly long enough, for you to know everything that I need to tell you or that I want to tell you. So typically I find on average that it's about a 20-minute, which, as you said, having about 8 to 12 minutes leaves you always having to edit that story, always having to pare down that story, always having to recognize what's going to be uncomfortable for somebody that isn't really there to hold you, in that space as well. Somebody that's just looking to check the boxes, give you a prescription and get you on your way because they have 3 other people waiting. So from that sense, it is so vital to me to have that time and to take that time. And there are times that my clients will see me put down my pen because I'm not going to write. I'm just going to listen right now because you need to be heard. You need somebody to witness you finish, this sentence, finish this story, this moment that is so, I mean, that it makes my day, to have that I've never told anyone this, moment like that. To me, being able to witness that, being able to have those moments is really why it's important for me to limit my practice, so that not only I'm not working day and night, but also that I have the time to really get to those juicy moments with people as well.
I've always seen storytelling in naturopathic medicine as being part of a therapeutic process, where actually the listening and sitting with someone is actually a healing modality in and of itself. Would you agree with that?
That's right. Those pregnant pauses, those moments when somebody thinks they've said everything, but they recognize they've said everything that was on autopilot, and then now they're sort of being forced to say things they didn't think they came here to say. Those things are so, that's healing, is really having that moment to truly, I'm getting goosebumps, to really truly be witnessed, to really truly be heard, to, as I tell my clients, to fill the space. I'm sitting in my office right now and it has to be big enough to hold somebody's story.
Yeah. We talked at the beginning about, I'm going to call it the economics of healthcare. Talk a little bit about, because there's a perception that you're so expensive, and you mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about your view of all that, Sandy, the economics of how people pay for healthcare and HMOs and all those good things.
Yeah, I was one of those weird teenagers that was grilling, my different healthcare providers about HMOs and about insurance, and they were sort of kind enough, to indulge me, as a teenage kid who always wanted to be a doctor, from that standpoint. Um, with their frustrations, about insurance, with their frustrations and the limitations of their practice. So I think I didn't know that I was looking for naturopathic medicine when I was a curious teenager, but I knew I was looking for something more. And I knew the limitations, as far as, prescriptions, and as far as, those types of limitations that other providers fall into. So I find it really freeing, not to work with insurance. I do work with health savings accounts, or things that is essentially your money that you set aside pre-tax to pay for health, which I think everyone that has that capability and has that recognition that your health is in your hands would, if they had that capability, would do that, from that sense. So that's, your money that you get to spend the way that you want, and no one is taking a, percentage of it, so to speak. So in that sense, it's really important for me to make this accessible, to not, charge extraordinary amounts of money. My initial visit is $150, which to me, some of my clients gasp, and some of my clients, are like, wait, that's it? Like they're expecting it to be, even another digit, let alone, that there are definitely naturopathic doctors who practice in different states and cities where they have huge levels of, expenses for their office, or huge levels of expenses, within their office, where they've chosen to have marble floors, or, something along those lines. And to me, those types of things are fantastic, and they're very inviting, but I'd rather have a very small, my practice is based in my home. To me, if I would invite somebody into my home, I really, really want to treat them, as well as possible. So that's how I keep, my prices affordable in that sense. And then follow-up visits are between 50 and 75, depending on how much time we spend. So that's really a commitment, to me. And I'm so grateful that I have clients who have means, who essentially say to me, I'm going to pay you more than that. You're worth more than that to me. And I utilize that to sort of subsidize, or to pay it forward, for clients that struggle, or for clients that have concerns or questions or issues, or on a fixed income, or things along those lines. So luckily, my clients put themselves on a sliding scale, if they have means and they have ability, and they are so grateful, that is a way that they contribute to the health of the community. If that helps answer that question too.
Yeah, very much so, Sandy. Thank you. We're just about out of time, but would you put up your contact information? Share where, yep. This is where Sandy can be reached. And as I listen to Sandy, I've known Sandy for almost 11 years now. And the practitioners that we feature at Healthy for Life, the emphasis is on healthy for life. They don't manage diseases, and we recognize the fact our healthcare system is a disease management. That's not a name calling or a judgment. That's just the fact of life. And we want to promote health. We're called Healthy for Life, and so we recommend the practitioners like Sandy. And Sandy and I were talking at the beginning. There are not a ton of them in the Des Moines area, which is unfortunate, because their abilities, their training can be so helpful to help people on the journey back to health.
Mm-hmm.
And health is far less expensive than managing your diseases. And so that's why we do what we do here at Healthy for Life in our speaker series. Sandy, I just want to thank you again for coming and speaking. It's as always, very, very enlightening and helpful. And you're a great educator. And everyone on the call, thank you. I hope you understand the value. And go visit Sandy if you ever want. I refer as many people as I can to her. And that's where we are. So thank you, and thank everybody for coming, and we'll see you next month. Brian Peskin, famous name at Healthy for Life, will possibly be into town. That's not a rumor. He may be here in person. So that'll be sometime. You'll get an email for that. So again, Sandy, thank you, and thank everybody for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Thanks.